as the government highlights more and more its incompetence, and government's always been incompetent, but we're really seeing more government incompetence after COVID. And I want to review for you just very quickly part of my theory. Part of my theory is if you go back to ancient Rome, the glory of Rome meant everything to everyone, and so the bureaucrats could keep the empire running even as the emperors were killing each other and the armies were fighting. The bureaucrats kept Rome running because it was for the glory of Rome. When Christianity took over, that's when Rome's real decline began. If you read Gibbon's in the History of the Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, that the smart people stopped giving their all to the glory of Rome and started giving their all to the glory of the church. And pretty soon the bureaucracy could no longer competently run Rome because all the best bureaucrats were now ministers in the church. In this country, after World War II, a lot of people realized the United States needed to be strong and a force for good in the world, and they moved into government with the aim of building up the United States into being the best hope for civilization and to avoid nuclear holocaust. The heirs of those people saw how those people were so committed to it that they came into power, ensuring the mission of continuing to perpetuate the United States as the last best hope for mankind. This third generation of bureaucrat post-World War II that's taking over things, all they've ever known is the competencies, and they take it for granted. And because they take it for granted, the competencies of government have begun to collapse around us. And into the incompetence that we're seeing now and the inefficiency that we're seeing now, we have a social media that everyone is plugged into, 24-hour news cycles, and people's need to feel relevant and to establish clout. And into that, we have filled the void with a lot of grifters who take advantage of people. There's no difference between those scammers and the scammers who call you and tell you they're calling on behalf of your friend who's stranded in Bombay and please send money to this account number for them. They're waiting and they need your help. We have the same thing with people online, tricking people. Like, for example, I should not have had to say anything. But yesterday, I was compelled to go on social media and point out that the biolab in Conyers, Georgia that was on fire was not a bioweapons laboratory. I was shocked at the number of people who were circulating tweets online about this biolaboratory. They were calling it a biolab in Conyers, Georgia. Some of them had no idea, but the original people were just flat out malicious in trying to scare people that a bioweapons laboratory in Conyers, Georgia was on fire. And there's nothing truthful about it other than there was a fire. The name of the company is Biolabs. For those of you who have pools, you more likely than not get your pool supplies from this company. They make the pool chemicals for BioGuard, SpaGuard, ProGuard, Spa Essentials, SeaClear, Aquapill, and Natural Chemistry. They're the leader in pool supplies and water testing for pools and spa care. They call themselves Biolab, and their plant burned up. I believe I heard in the newspaper yesterday that it was not the first time there were problems there. And yet the grifters and the hucksters were scaring people that Ebola might be being released into the wild from a biolab, just like in Ukraine, don't you know, in North Carolina and the like. Scaring people about it. That's one of the many delusional lies that circulated from malicious people online. And listen, you got this massive cloud, you got this big fire, you go to social media, here's someone with 1 million followers, and they act like they know what they're talking about. They have footage of the fire, and they're saying, this is terrible. This is a biolab in Conyers, Georgia. We don't know the bacteria and viruses that could be released into the air because of this. Well, you're going to be a little paranoid about it. A friend of mine texted me the other day, and it's kind of funny because it happened to me this morning. I had never seen it before. A friend of mine texted me on Friday with a screenshot of a text she had gotten from a company saying you are $11.43 in deficit in your Peach Pass, that's the toll system in Georgia. Click this link to fill up your account before you get a ticket. And she texted to me, she says, is this real? And no, it wasn't real. It was from but it looked legit. It totally looked legit. And they were preying on her fears of possibly getting a big fine for being in arrearage in her toll pass account. Literally the same thing happened to me. In fact, I've got mine right here. I can tell you. So this is what it was. We've noticed an outstanding toll amount of $19.29 on your record. To avoid a late fee of $50, visit this link to settle your balance. Complete scam. But are you sure it's a scam? Maybe you need to click through. It's the same thing that's happening to people on social media who are going for news and they're being misled. Think about the ABC News affidavit. An anonymous account convinced a lot of people on the right that there was a whistleblower who blew the whistle on and filed an affidavit that ABC News had given the answers to, or the questions to, Kamala Harris before the debate. Some of you probably still believe it. It's all now been thoroughly debunked by everyone involved. There was no there, but people for about 72 hours fully bought into the idea that someone had signed an affidavit. Now, if you actually saw the affidavit, you could tell it was very screwed up. There were grammar mistakes, basic spelling mistakes, basic factual issues about the affidavit, but people believed it. People believed it because it rested on their prior beliefs that the media's in the tank for Kamala Harris. They were willing to believe it, and they got scammed. There was also the Travis Kelce, Taylor Swift was going to endorse Joe Biden and get engaged at the Super Bowl story. That I know a guy who, when I was scoffing at this and saying, of course it didn't happen, he's like, well, how can you blame people for not believing it? I was like, I can blame people for believing it because it was a stupid rumor fueled by a bunch of idiots on social media that you shouldn't believe. It's like, no, there were credible people who were suggesting it, and it all made sense. You know she's in the tank for Biden. Yes, she's in the tank for the Democrats. She always has been. That doesn't mean she's going to get engaged at the Super Bowl as a big win for them. The whole thing was dumb. But people, once they buy into this stuff, they're hard-pressed to admit they got fooled because then they've got to admit they're foolish. And the Democrats love to point this stuff out about how so many Republicans are just buying into all these crazy conspiracy theories, except it's the Democrats who bought into the Steele dossier. To this day, Democrats are with epistemic certainty convinced Russia stole the election for Donald Trump, and they have to believe it. Otherwise, they have to explain why they were stupid enough to nominate Hillary Clinton in 2016, but it's not true. The Russians did not steal the election for Donald Trump in 2016. Hillary Clinton was a terrible candidate with a terrible campaign. It's just the truth. Or what about the Charlottesville stuff? It's been thoroughly debunked, even by liberal fact checkers. Donald Trump did not say there were good people on both sides, meaning the neo-Nazis. What Donald Trump said was that on the debate of whether or not to take down statues of Confederate soldiers, there were good people on both sides. There were those who believed that they were symbols of heritage, not hate, and they shouldn't be taken down. There were people who believed they were hate, not heritage. They should be taken down. There are good people on both sides. Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, others have all said, no, this is Donald Trump talking about the neo-Nazis, that they were good people. It's been debunked by Snopes.com, and yet Democrats still want to believe it because they want to believe the worst about their opponents. In the same way, many people on the right want to believe the worst about their opponents, and so many people are now getting sucked in to the grifters and the charlatans who are getting massive followings, who are profiting. You know, the more you circulate their tweets, they get paid by Twitter. So that's what they're doing. They're seeding these things about a bioweapons laboratory in Conyers, Georgia, catching on fire because they know you're going to have questions about it. You're going to either engage with the tweet or retweet it and ask questions about it, and that's going to make them money. Twitter has made lying profitable, and both sides are doing it. Remember the FEMA camps? I know someone who was convinced there were FEMA camps up in North Georgia. And then there's the anti-Semitism. On the left in particular, the rising tide of conspiracies about Israel and the Jews. We have separated ourselves from truth. All that matters for the hucksters, grifters, and frauds is profit. And a lot of people are being taken advantage of, enough to be put into a panic yesterday that a bioweapons lab was burning up in Conyers, Georgia, and everybody was going to die when it was just a company called Biolabs that makes pool chemicals, which is bad enough, the chlorine and the bromine and other things like that. But it wasn't the end of the world. There are just a whole lot of people profiting off you, hoping that you believed it was the end of the world.